everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic, and it's time for AEW Revolution, Sting's final match, the big triple threat for the AEW World Championship, and lots more as well. So let's run down everything that happened, as this is what happened at AEW Revolution 2024. Let's go. Couple of matches on the pre-show to talk about, the first one being a 12-man tag, the Bang Bang Scissor Gang, taking on the heel team of Jeff Jarrett, Jay Lethal, Satnam Singh, Private Party, and Willie Mack. During the entrances, Mack's caster messes up his rap again. He's done that recently, but this time it kind of seems deliberate. He's very frustrated, the heels are all laughing at him, and he's stomping his feet in frustration. Early on, we see heelish tactics from the heel team, cheap shots behind the referee's back, that sort of thing. Even Karen Jarrett gets involved on the outside as well, and all the heels do a lovely big strut on the outside. A miscommunication from Private Party ends up knocking the heels off the apron, and Bowens gets the hot tag to run wild for the babyfaces. Sanjay Dutt tries to distract him on the apron, but he knocks him down with a big right hand. Satnam Singh comes in and just tosses Bowens around with ease, but a little bit later on, Bowens does manage to get the hot tag to Billy Gunn. Billy goes for the Faymaster on Willie Mack, but Satnam grabs his leg on the outside. Then a few heels hit their big signature moves on Billy Gunn, who then kicks out at 2 when Willie Mack makes the pinfall attempt. Wow, no selling everything. Billy then avoids a frog splash from Willie Mack, and now the faces run through some of their signature offense instead. Satnam then clears out a few opponents and possibly accidentally no-sells a chop block from Jay White, but does fall victim to the Faymaster. Willie Mack takes the switchblade from Jay, and that's all she wrote. The Bang Bang Scissor Gang get the win. Jay gets on the mic afterwards and teases Mack's caster for flubbing his rap at the start, and throughout this promo, Max is visibly annoyed in the background. Jay hypes the crowd for the rest of the event and says that maybe at the Boston show in a couple of weeks' time, he'll take care of some big business of his own. What could that mean? We'll have to wait and find out. Before the next pre-show match, we get a Pac vignette. Oh my god, he's back, and he's in various locations around Newcastle upon Tyne. He's sat on Gray's Monument. How did they get that footage with nobody there? It must have been very early in the morning on a weekday. Pac says that he's still alive and that Tony Khan will not get rid of him and he's going to turn AEW upside down. It's all very sinister, very creepy. I would love to see Pac return as a heel perhaps, but honestly, I don't care if he's a heel or a face. We'll take Pac however we get it. Also at ringside, Tony Schiavone does a quick interview with David Crockett of the Crockett family. We are, of course, in mid-Atlantic territory. The second and final match of the pre-show is Willow Nightingale and Kris Statlander versus Julia Hart and Skye Blue. Stokely Hathaway is on guest commentary on behalf of the faces, who are dominant early on with stereo delayed vertical suplexes. But the heels take control and they beat down Willow Nightingale for quite a long time, building anticipation for the hot tag to Kris Statlander. Kris finally does get the hot tag and runs wild for a while, hitting both opponents simultaneously with a nice double back elbow off the middle rope. Julia gets Heartless locked in, but Statlander counters it, rolling her into a near fall. Then Willow comes in and tries to get both opponents with a running cannonball, but Julia avoids it. Skye takes the full force of the move. Willow hits Julia with the Death Valley Driver, but the TBS champion kicks out at 2. A little bit later on, Julia hits her signature moonsault on Statlander, but Nightingale breaks up the pinfall. She then becomes the legal woman, so does Skye Blue, but Skye gets pounced halfway across the ring by Willow, who then hits her finisher on Skye, 1, 2, 3, and the babyfaces win the match. After the match, it's also implied quite heavily by Stokely that Willow will be going for Julia's TBS title. The first match of the main show is the TNT Championship match, with Christian Cage defending against Daniel Garcia. The challenger steals the belt during the stare down and holds it up. Is that a jinx? Is that bad luck? We'll find out. This one starts off quite patiently with a lot of grappling, with obviously the other members of the patriarchy watching on from the outside. Christian is stalling a lot early on, even faking an ankle injury at one point to draw the challenger in before hitting him with a cheap shot. Christian gets firmly in control, Garcia fights back but ends up getting sent outside of the ring, and then Christian leaps from the corner to the outside with a very uncharacteristic high-risk splash, all the way, as I say, to the outside of the ring. He sets up back inside for the kill switch, but Garcia slips out the back and chop blocks the leg, which gives Christian trouble for the rest of the match. Garcia also locks in an ankle lock, but the champion kicks him away. Nick Wayne charges at Garcia on the outside, but gets backdropped into the timekeeper's area. Back in the ring, Garcia builds up a big head of steam and pulls Christian's turtleneck up over his head, hitting the 10 punches in the corner, with added gyrating, naturally. Christian goes for another big splash later on, but Garcia catches him with another ankle lock. Again, Christian escapes, but gets hit with a delayed back suplex for 2. After this maneuver, the referee checks on Christian, which allows Killswitch to hit a choke slam from the apron. Christian adds another big splash from the corner, but again it only gets 2. Killswitch tries to interfere again, but here comes Matt Menard running out from the back to even the odds. He blocks a slap from Mother Wayne on the outside and brawls with Killswitch all the way to the back. Back in the ring, Christian goes for a big spear, but his weakened leg slows him down. Garcia grabs him and hits a piledriver, and the crowd bites hard on the pinfall attempt, but the champion just survives. A quick pinfall attempt again from Garcia almost gets 3 as well, but Christian grabs the ropes, and then Nick Wayne hits a cheap shot from the outside of the ring. Christian hits the kill switch and cheaply retains the championship. Next up, we get the match for Eddie Kingston's Continental Crown. Eddie Kingston versus Bryan Danielson. And remember, if Danielson loses, he must shake Eddie Kingston's hand. This one also has a bit of a patient start, and Kingston's leg gives him trouble early on, but because he's Eddie Kingston, he actually encourages Bryan to kick it more and dish out more damage. Eddie fires off a lot of chops in the corner and a few headbutts, followed by a Saito suplex, and Bryan has to roll to the outside to take a breather, but no, because Eddie charges out with a big dive. He is still visibly favouring the leg though. He hits more chops on the apron, but Bryan ducks one and Eddie hits the ring post with his hand, but the worst is yet to come, because Bryan hits him with a terrifying vertical suplex from the apron to the outside of the ring. Bryan is on top after that, and he works the arm of Eddie until an axe handle attempt off the middle rope gets caught with an overhead suplex. Eddie's now on top, locks in a dragon sleeper and looks to transition to the stretch plum, but Bryan counters it with a wrist lock, but then Eddie rolls back through and does the kind of Blackpool Combat Club-esque elbows. A nasty looking dragon suplex gets 2 for Bryan, but a little bit later on he has to kick out of a back fist and a Northern Lights bomb from Eddie Kingston, so it's very evenly matched. A running knee attempt is countered into another back fist, but then Eddie hurts his own hand in the process. Bryan hits a huge kick to that same hand and the running knee, but again Eddie manages to survive. A triangle sleeper almost knocks Eddie out, but he scoots slowly backwards and just about gets one of his feet on the bottom rope. Now, we've seen wrestlers pull down the straps when they're firing up. Eddie pulls his down to take some kicks to the chest from Bryan, urging him once again to hit him more. He ducks one of these kicks and no-sells a suplex to hit one of his own on Bryan, and both men are down. They get back to their feet shakily and have a tired strike exchange, Eddie fighting with one hand because the other one's totally gone at this point. Bryan, though, gets the advantage and charges with another running knee attempt, but Eddie counters it with a left-hand lariat and a big powerbomb, high stack on the pinfall, and he gets it. Eddie Kingston wins the match and retains his Continental Crown. But of course, all eyes are on the aftermath. Does Bryan Danielson shake hands with Eddie Kingston? And after it looks like he's not going to, and a few teasers here and there, he actually does it and raises Kingston's hand to the adulation of the crowd. So fair play, Bryan Danielson. He adhered to the stipulation. Now it's time for the match that was supposed to be Meat Madness, but instead has been modified into the All-Star Scramble for a shot at the AEW World title. The competitors are Chris Jericho, Wardlow, Powerhouse Hobbs, Lance Archer, Hook, Brian Cage, and Dante Martin. Oh, and, CMLL star Magnus as well. Almost forgot about Magnus. There's a big brawl to start with the heels joining forces to clear the ring before having a big pose down. They then charge each other with shoulder blocks to the chants of meat, meat, meat from the very excited crowd. Archer and Wardlow win the fight and square off against each other, and Archer does his very impressive rope walk moonsault. He tries it on Hobbs as well, but Hobbs drags him down and hits the spinebuster. Jericho sneaks in to hit Wardlow with a code breaker, and now the smaller lads all get back inside, and Jericho leads a similar shoulder block contest from before, but needless to say, it's not quite as meaty. The smaller guys all hit dives onto the bigger guys on the outside. Even Hook heads up top and hits Cage with a flying axe handle from the corner. We get a series of big superplexes followed by a massive frog splash from Dante Martin onto Cage, but it only gets 2. Unfortunately, Dante then kind of slips on a dive to the outside, but he seems okay thankfully and gets a near fall on Jericho back in the ring. Magnus then hits a 619 and he runs wild for a little bit, only for Archer to take control and level him with a choke slam, but it only gets 2. This match is 100 miles an hour. Jericho and Magnus team up with a double line salt on Archer, but again he kicks out at 2 as well. Hobbs takes control with a few suplexes, Brian Cage does the same for a while, but it's Wardlow who stands tall, dishing out a few German suplexes for everyone. He sets up Cage for the big powerbomb, but Hook jumps on his back with Red Rum. Jericho then applies the walls simultaneously, but Wardlow manages to hang on until it gets broken up. The fight spills to the outside where Hobbs drops Jericho with a big slam and then runs with a spear attempt, but Jericho has I think it was like a dry ice machine or something. It was a jug of chemicals which turned into, it was liquid, but it became gaseous as it hit the night sky. I don't know what it was. It blinded Hobbs anyway, and he missed the spear. Any chemists out there, please correct me in the comments down below. What was that? Anyway, back in the ring, Cage runs wild, but Wardlow stops him with a massive headbutt and lariat. He nails the powerbomb, but gets rolled up by Dante for 2. Dante hits his lovely springboard moonsault on Archer, but Wardlow knocks him out of midair shortly afterwards. Hook goes for Red Rum again, but Wardlow manages to get out of it, and then drops Dante with not just a powerbomb, kind of a last ride, and it's Wardlow who gets the 3 count and the AEW World title shot. The next match sees Orange Cassidy defending the international title against Roderick Strong. Roddy enters with a sinister cloak and mask. Not sure if that was a reference I missed or just because he's part of Adam Cole's very devilish stable. The champion is all beaten up, he's got taped up ribs. Roddy charges him to start, but Cassidy avoids it and almost gets a flash 3 count, but Roddy kicks out. Strong takes control, targeting the ribs and back, and even dropping Orange Cassidy over the guardrail on the outside. Cassidy nails a dive a little bit later on, but Roddy is quick to retake control, and Cassidy is too banged up to establish an advantage for any real length of time. That kind of becomes the story of the match. Every time Orange Cassidy fires up, Roddy Strong is just one suplex or backbreaker away from retaking control. The scariest move of the match comes when Roddy hits a huge backbreaker over the top turnbuckle, dropping Cassidy mid-air onto the top rope. It's very scary, but it looks like it went off as planned. Orange can barely get to his knees. Every time he fires up, Roddy again is quick to retake control. Orange Cassidy does hit Stun Dog Millionaire, but again is slow to recover, and that lets Roddy hit yet another backbreaker. Strong locks in a Boston Crab and a Lion Tamer, which almost makes the champion tap out, but he manages to get out of it and hits a couple of DDTs. He then gets a near fall of his own off Panama Sunrise of all things, stealing the finisher of Adam Cole, but Strong kicks out at 2. The Orange Punch connects and the Beach Break, despite a bit of trouble with the back, but Roddy breaks the pinfall attempt with a leg on the ropes. They get back to their feet, Roddy manages to hit the jumping knee and the end of Heartache to become the new AEW International Champion after a long and grueling reign for Orange Cassidy. Taven and Bennett run out to celebrate with Roddy, but their celebration is interrupted by someone jumping the guardrail. It's Kyle O'Reilly. He squares off with the heels, but oh, just kidding, he gives Strong a big hug. They offer him an Undisputed Kingdom t-shirt saying, come on, join our stable. But Kyle turns the t-shirt down, whispers something in Roddy's ear, and then just gets out the ring, and we see him on the ramp looking visibly emotional. I guess we'll have to wait to find out more and see where this story goes. Next up, it's the big tag team clash between Jon Moxley and Claudio Castagnoli of the Blackpool Combat Club and FTR in North Carolina. So, well, I was going to say the crowd are firmly behind them, but I think they were just here to see some good old-fashioned manly action. It's worth mentioning as well that the BCC members seem to be paying tribute to the Road Warriors with their very cool entrance gear. We do get macho manly wrestling to start between Claudio and Dax, which quickly devolves into a slap battle. Claudio wins this mini battle with a big European uppercut. A little bit later on, Cash is in, but he gets dumped off the corner all the way to the outside by Claudio. Moxley then heads outside and sends Cash into the front row, and they brawl in the crowd for a little bit. Cash becomes face in peril for a while, but he does get the tag to Dax. Claudio goes for the pop-up uppercut on Dax, but Dax reverses it into a flash roll-up, but it only gets 2. Claudio goes for the Gotch pile driver, but Cash leans over the top rope and pushes Dax's feet back down. He then tags in, but gets clobbered with a lariat, but it only gets 2. Meanwhile, during this exchange, Dax gets ran into the ring post and spills to the outside, and when we next see him, he's bleeding heavily. Claudio reverses a Doomsday Device attempt into a very impressive mid-air power slam, but Dax kicks out, even though he looks all messed up. He bravely has a strike exchange with Moxley and then is able to get the spike piledriver with help from Cash, but Moxley kicks out this time. The BCC then hit a version of the Doomsday device of their own, with Claudio scaling the ropes to hit an uppercut, but Cash dives off the top and shoves Claudio into Moxley's pinfall attempt to break it up. Claudio blocks the Shatter Machine and swings Dax while Moxley hits a cutter on Cash. The swing continues and then Moxley hits a dropkick onto Dax while he's in mid-swing. Dax is in trouble now. Moxley bites his wound and both BCC members set up for a double superplex, but Cash breaks it up and FTR do hit their version of the Doomsday device on Moxley. He manages to kick out but is then immediately hit with the Shatter Machine. He's not going to kick out of that, but luckily for him, Claudio is on hand to break up the pinfall just in time. Cash flies with a dive to Claudio on the outside, but Claudio's ready with a mid-air uppercut attempt. He then hits the Gotch piledriver, but then Dax hits a piledriver of his own to Claudio also. Back in the ring, Dax blocks a paradigm shift from Moxley, but not for long. They counter each other's signature moves, and finally Moxley hits the Death Rider or the paradigm shift, not sure which one it was, but Dax manages to kick out. He then tries a desperation surprise pinfall attempt of his own, but Moxley survives that. The BCC grabs stereo sleeper holds on both FTR members, and Dax is finally rendered unconscious. Moxley and Claudio pick up the big, impressive win in an all-action, very gritty match. There's no handshake afterwards, but both teams have a tense yet I think somewhat respectful stare down, and yeah, this developed very nicely indeed. Next up, the AEW Women's World Title match. Timeless Toni Storm defending against her old friend and now foe, Deonna Purrazzo. During the champ's entrance, we see that Mariah May is dressed as Toni Storm's old gimmick, so mind games. Toni wins an early grapple and celebrates in very dramatic over-the-top fashion, but then Deonna gets an arm drag and she does her signature pose, much to Toni's annoyance. They do some nice mat work and exchange submission attempts. Deonna seems to be getting the better of it, so Toni has to grab her hair, but Deonna gets back in control and slaps on the first of many armbar attempts, but Toni immediately grabs the ropes, or gets her foot on the ropes. She breaks the hold. Deonna wins a strike exchange, so Toni rolls to the outside for a quick back massage from Luther, but Deonna isn't hanging around and drops her with a baseball slide. Deonna runs Toni into the corner, but the ref's in the way, and this allows Toni to blindside Deonna with a low blow. The announce team wonder if that even works, and apparently yes it does, as Toni takes control of the match. Storm presses the advantage for a while until Deonna hits a heavy slap before firing up and nailing a Russian leg sweep, transitioning into an immediate Fujiwara armbar. Toni rolls out of it but gets dropped with a pump kick. Deonna then charges Toni in the corner, but Storm sneakily trips her and then hits that heavy running hip attack followed by a DDT, but it only gets 2. Toni grabs an ankle lock, but Deonna kicks her way out. She then knocks Toni off the apron. Luther catches Toni on the outside, but Deonna hits a crossbody from the top to the outside, knocking both down. Back in the ring, Deonna gets another armbar and this time goes for the Venus de Milo. She gets it locked in, but Luther distracts the referee as Toni taps out. Mariah May gets on the apron, so Deonna kicks her down, but she turns back into a pile driver from Toni Storm. 1, 2, 3, and the Timeless One retains the title in dirty heelish fashion. Next up, it's the big match between Will Ospreay and Konosuke Takeshita, with both men's stable leader Don Callis joining the announce team. We get a quick exchange to start, which Ospreay wins with a head scissors, but Takeshita asserts control with a big superplex from the top. He then hits a big senton from the second rope and starts to dominate Ospreay with some heavy strikes. Ospreay fights back with the springboard forearm and that handspring corkscrew kick he does. Takeshita rolls outside, but Ospreay slingshots over the top to continue the attack. Soon after though, Takeshita hits a Kenny Omega-esque swanton dive to the outside, and both men are down. Back in the ring, Takeshita avoids a corkscrew and hits a nasty bridging German suplex for 2. He hits another German, but runs into the Spanish fly. Both men exchange heavy forearm strikes, and Takeshita seems to be winning the battle, but Ospreay knocks him down with a quick super kick. I know how that feels. A big discus forearm knocks Takeshita down, and he seems to maybe be knocked out. The referee thinks about stopping it, but Takeshita rises and hits a couple of massive elbow strikes. Ospreay fires up with Kawada-style kicks to the head, but Takeshita's third elbow is huge and drops the Englishman. They get out of each other's powerbomb attempts until Ospreay nails a hook kick and a tiger driver, but it only gets 2. The Os Cutter is then reversed mid-air into a fantastic blue thunder bomb from Takeshita, but that also only gets 2. Ospreay does hit the Cutter a little bit later on, but Takeshita kicks out, so Ospreay goes for the hidden blade, but Takeshita meets him with another thunderous elbow strike for a very near fall. Ospreay fights back into it and hits the cheeky Nando's kick. He goes up top for a Frankensteiner, but Takeshita hangs onto the top rope and Ospreay crashes and burns on the canvas. Takeshita goes for that brainbuster into the top turnbuckle, but Ospreay's head misses the top turnbuckle and he falls terrifyingly down towards the canvas. It goes badly, not as badly as it could have done, but his lower back seems to take the brunt of the fall. Really scary stuff, but it kind of worked in the context of the match. Takeshita drops the knee pad, but Ospreay catches the big knee strike. He gets Stundog Millionaire and a Poison Rana, followed by a Stormbreaker attempt, but Takeshita reverses it into like a jumping tombstone into a wheelbarrow back suplex thing. But Ospreay fires up and hits the hidden blade, but Takeshita kicks out at 1, and this exchange has the crowd all fired up. The Stormbreaker is again avoided, and Ospreay gets clocked with a massive running lariat. The knee strike, though, is again caught, and Ospreay hits the Styles Clash, but it only gets 2. The scary Tiger Driver version that nearly destroyed Kenny Omega connects onto Takeshita, followed by the hidden blade, and Will Ospreay wins the match. In my opinion, probably a match of the year contender. There were some very scary moments, but yeah, it was just excellent stuff between two excellent wrestlers. Don Callis checks on both men in the ring as Carl Fletcher comes down to ringside. Ospreay and Takeshita bow to each other very respectfully, but Fletcher gets in the ring for a stare down with Ospreay. It turns into a big hug. They are both United Empire stablemates, aren't they? And Excalibur announces on commentary a match between the two of them, Ospreay versus Fletcher, on next week's Dynamite. The penultimate match of the night is for the AEW World title, with Samoa Joe defending against two opponents, Hangman Adam Page and Swerve Strickland. Hangman and Swerve stare each other down to start, but Joe doesn't like this and furiously attacks both of them. Swerve leaps at him from the middle rope at one point, but Joe does his walkaway spot to a big pop. Joe carries on this momentum with a big dive to the outside on Swerve and blocks Hangman's dive attempt with an enziguri. Joe is very much dominating the early stages, but this period of dominance eventually ends as Swerve takes control of the match and hits a diving elbow strike to the back of Joe on the outside, and then Swerve does his little dance around the ring to celebrate. Back inside, Hangman hits a belly to belly, and it doesn't look like Strickland's going to kick out in time. He eventually does, and I think that's because Joe was maybe a little bit too late to break it up. Joe presses the advantage and takes control of the match for a while, but the two hated rivals team up to drop him with a big double powerbomb. Then the story of the match kind of becomes Swerve and Hangman getting very near falls on each other, only for Joe to have to continually break them up. Joe hits the muscle buster on Page, but then Strickland comes off top with a Swerve stomp to Joe, followed by a house call kick. The champion is completely laid out, but Swerve focuses on Hangman instead of making the pinfall. Could it be a mistake? Yes, as a house call to Hangman is kicked out of on the stroke of 3. Swerve gets a 450 splash to the back of Joe, followed by another Swerve stomp, 1, 2, and then the ref kind of has to slow his own count before Hangman drags him out of the ring. Another one of those iffy instances, but I do see what they were going for. Anyway, Hangman grabs the title belt and clocks Swerve with it a couple of times. Swerve is down and out on the outside of the ring, but Hangman wastes a bit of time talking trash to Swerve. Or does he waste time, because he then nails Joe with a couple of big buckshot lariats, but there's no referee. A replacement ref runs out, 1, 2, but Joe kicks out. Hangman can't believe it, but goes for a third lariat. Joe ducks it and locks in the coquina clutch. Swerve heads up top though, and breaks up the submission with a crazy Skye Twister press. Prince Nana gives Swerve the jeweled crown to use, but Swerve throws it back to him and wants to win fair and square. This does turn out to be a mistake though, as Joe grabs the clutch again, but Swerve reverses it into a roll-up, 1, 2, but Hangman nails the referee in the back of the head and just flagrantly beats the official down. Hangman gets the buckshot lariat on Joe again, but then Swerve hits a buckshot on Hangman. He then hits the JML driver, but Joe runs back in and hits a half-and-half suplex on Swerve before clamping the clutch on Hangman. Swerve crawls to try and break up the submission, but I think the original referee is on hand, and Hangman taps out before Swerve can get there. Swerve is heartbroken, Hangman taps out, and Samoa Joe is still the AEW World Champion. Before the main event, we get a new pay-per-view announcement. On April 21st in St. Louis, AEW presents Dynasty, so we'll see what the card looks like. And finally, the main event. Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat are in attendance for, of course, Sting's last ever match. For the AEW Tag Team titles, it's Sting and Darby Allin defending against Matthew and Nicholas Jackson, the Young Bucks. The Bucks come out first. The confetti during their entrance is business cards, which is a nice heelish touch. Darby comes out. We get a video package of Sting before his entrance, watching his own career highlights in an empty theatre, although it's mainly NWA and AEW stuff, because obviously WWE owns a lot of the footage. Unless you really wanted to see his WrestleMania loss to Triple H, I think they kind of worked around it nicely. Sting's sons come out to his AW theme. They are dressed as previous versions of Sting, while the real Sting arrives to seek and destroy, which gets a big pop from the crowd. Darby starts us off with an immediate dive to the Bucks on the outside, and the faces are well in control with some Stinger splashes back in the ring. Sting's sons get involved and hit some splashes of their own because this is a tornado tag, there's no DQ, all that good stuff. Sting slaps a double Scorpion Deathlock on both Bucks at the same time, and then the action spills to the outside. He's whipping them into the barricade, he's throwing them into the crowd, he's no-selling a few body shots from Matthew, and he's hitting them with a chair. It's all Sting, and that's the way it should be. Darby does eventually get involved again, hitting a coffin drop to the outside on both Bucks before Sting pulls a couple of panes of glass out from under the ring. Oh no. Sting misses a baseball bat shot on one of the Bucks, and I think the bat was meant to break one of the panes of glass. Kind of misses. Sting just breaks it anyway. Why not? They brawl up to the stage where on one side of it, Nicholas hits a Falcon Arrow to Darby off the side of the stage, sending both through tables below. On the other side, I'm thinking they wouldn't do that to Sting. Yes, they would. Sting goes for a Scorpion Death Drop. Matthew gouges the eyes, reverses the momentum, and then vertical suplexes 64-year-old Sting off the side of the stage through tables below. Jesus. Back in the ring, the Bucks isolate Darby and powerbomb him into a ladder. Darby fights back and sets up the ladder, which, oh my god, is massive. He climbs up and misses a swanton through a glass pane on the outside, which is suspended between a set of chairs, but can't break his fall much at all. Basically takes a back bump from the top of this huge ladder on the floor on the outside through glass. His back's a mess. It's terrifying. Also, we don't see Darby for a long time in the match after this, but thankfully, I think he's about as okay as you could be. The Bucks drag Sting back into the ring and beat him down, but he fights back and looks to put one of them through a table off the ladder. But the Bucks fight back. Sting gets powerbombed through the table instead himself, but he no-sells it to a huge reaction. The Bucks again take control and launch Sting through a pane of glass in the corner. Then they hit him with a low blow, and then Matthew hits the Scorpion Death Drop on Sting, but Sting kicks out in time. The Bucks go to get the belts from the Timekeeper's area to use them as weapons. That's too much for ultimate babyface Ricky Steamboat, who stops it and starts to kick the Bucks' ass, but they fight back and beat him down. Ric Flair gets in the ring and covers Sting, lies over him to protect him, so the Bucks just super kick Ric Flair in the head. Steamboat makes it to the apron, he gets super kicked off that as well, and then Matthew nails Sting in the face with one of the title belts, but again Sting kicks out. The Bucks look at Sting. I think we all suspected this kind of spot might happen, a callback to WrestleMania 24, but they say, we're not sorry, we hate you. Double super kick to Sting, who no-sells it, so then he fights back with a double clothesline, Scorpion Death Drop to Matthew, but Nicholas Jackson breaks up the pinfall. Another Scorpion Death Drop attempt is reversed, the Bucks hit the EVP trigger on Sting, but again he kicks out. This time the Bucks freak out, they're like, how can we put this guy away? But then they calm themselves down, they think we'll hit another EVP trigger. They mockingly shake Sting's hand, say thanks for all your work here and everything. Another EVP trigger. This time he kicks out with one. The Bucks hit a double super kick and go for what used to be the Melter driver, now the TK driver, of course. But Darby runs back in, pushes Nicholas off the top rope, and he flies through a table on the outside. Scorpion Death Drop from Sting to Matthew Jackson. 1-2. Matthew Jackson kicks out. Darby hits a coffin drop. Sting applies the Scorpion Deathlock, and finally, Matthew Jackson taps out. Sting wins his final match, and he and Darby are still the AEW Tag Team Champions. There's a huge celebration, confetti goes off and everything, very emotional scenes, very good stuff. This match was basically, it was really silly, but it was exactly what it needed to be as well. It was a tribute to Sting. He gave his all, so did Darby, so did the Bucks. Fair play to everyone involved. After the match, Sting gets on the mic, he thanks the fans, he pays tribute to Darby, then the show ends. It gets cut off, sadly, halfway through his promo. They must have gone over time. That's the end of this show. But we saw what really mattered, which was Sting's last match, which more than lived up to the hype. And I know it's tradition for a wrestler to lose their final match and everything, I think this is one of those rare instances where it made sense for him to win. It would have been a really sour ending if he'd lost, and I think it was probably the right call. But let me know what you think in that comment section down below. Let me know what you thought of any aspect of the show in the comment section down below, and thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Cultaholic. Thank you to Pierce and Joel for editing this video as well, and thank you once again for watching. I'll see you next time, and yeah, Sting forever.